Hey everyone, welcome to another Kemetic Crossroads. The first one that we did for Christmas time was well received, and so decided we'd do another one with my lovely co-host Darren.
Warning, this is not Christmas.
No, it's not. We're past Easter. And that gets into what we're going to talk about, because this time we're dealing with the pandemic. Everybody knows about it, unless they're, living in a cave and reading the Unabomber's manifesto. You know about the whole coronavirus pandemic. And one of the effects of that has been for a lot of things to shift to online that traditionally hadn't been, or not as much, and that includes church services. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because that's made a lot of news. And when Easter came up, there were a lot of churches that wanted to defy quarantine orders and have, members come in and things like that, whereas others have embraced the idea of doing online services and have, made the transition rather admirably. But I do have to say, as a pagan, one of my reactions to some of the angst that's been playing out over the news has been, what are you complaining about? Because for those of us who are pagan, oftentimes something online is our only option. There are very, very few physical pagan churches, be they groves or whatever, but they're scattered, the handful that you have across the country. And of course, if you're Kemetic, yes, there is the physical building for the Kemetic Orthodox, but unless you're Kemetic Orthodox, it's not really going to be your bag. So this is all we have, and for people to complain about, I've got to go have that physical building, is like, I'm going to turn it over to you as a Christian, and you have some really interesting thoughts about going to church.
Warning, this opinion should be considered fact. I won't say this often. I am right, they are wrong.
Okay, well, I think that the main thing to understand is you kind of differ from a lot of mainstream Christians in your belief, and in fact, don't go to church because...
I don't go to church because they don't talk very much about Christ, and they don't really understand what they report to read in that big black book. What I think about this situation is difficult for me, because while I would want anyone of any faith to be able to worship, and I can certainly appreciate the value of coming together as a congregation, a coven, a community, whatever qualifier fits your situation, I'm all for it. But in regards to these Christian churches that are saying we should be allowed to be open, we should be allowed to have service, no. Most weeks, most people that report to be Christian don't even haul their ass into a building called church, and now they're all of a sudden screaming that they gots to go. The house that they live in should be the first place they call church. If that don't cut it, I have a hard time believing that a building that you put a couple of dollar bills on a plate in the middle of once a week is. If you can't live it at home, what makes you think you're living it in the community? This is an insult to every medical staff member, every pizza delivery driver, every restaurateur, any essential personnel that have been working,
that have been busting their butts through
that have
this
been
thing.
busting their ass. This is a living insult to them, and this is a testament to selfishness.
If I might give a little bit of my own perspective on this, and I'm going to leave it open for you, because I'm not a Christian, I'm an outsider kind of looking in on it. But it seems to me that a lot of folks that go to church, it's a big deal for them because they get all in their Sunday best, and it's a social thing, and they want to be seen, and they want to talk to people, and there's an element of society, and being a social butterfly in that for some people, and it's not so much about actually going to worship as it is making appearances. Do you get that sense too?
And let me just say this. Let me be fair. Community is fine. Needing to see those people and needing to get in your Sunday best is okay. But bottom line, we have been asked to make a sacrifice of temporary liberty to make sure we do not destroy an entire society, an entire planet, and yes, an entire economy permanently. It's going to be much worse if we have to restart an economy twice. So, not to get too religious here, but Christians are supposed to love through sacrifice. Then sacrifice and sit your ass at home. It's not like they're putting you on a cross, people.
Yeah. Another thing, that I think may be at work here, and again, this is going back to some of the things that, when you start reading about ancient Near Eastern religions, the forerunner to modern Judaism is one of them, and that, carried down into Christianity. But at one time, the ancient Israelites worshipped in their own homes too. They had shrines, and there was often more than, just, something to symbolize, Yahweh in there. That one time they were polytheists. But you had the reforms that came about under certain kings, and those are, we know them now as the chapter of Deuteronomy. And some of those reforms involved trying to put all of the focus on the main temple in Jerusalem, and to express the idea that that was the home of God. And so it was, the other, anything you had in your house was suddenly less valid. Funny thing is, the early Christians, they were kind of like us pagans now. They were the minority, and they had to go and worship in their own houses. And the funny thing is, some of the things that have been accused, charges leveled today against, people who, practice the occult, that they, would have blood sacrifices and eat babies and stuff like that. The ancient Romans said that about Christians too. So it's strange. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But I think once, Christianity got established enough for you to have churches, then they kind of got into that thing with, the insistence going back to Deuteronomy that, the house of God is something that's established and has clergy supporting it, and not your own home. And so, a shrine in your own home was associated more with paganism. And I think it's unfortunate because, like you were saying, you can, if you can't be a Christian in your own home and worship, then, how are you going to take it to someplace else?
And please forgive me for looking like I was ignoring everything. I was actually just pulling out
a concordance?
My phone, because I wanted to point out a piece of scripture. For those of you who are not Christian, thank you for bearing with me in this moment. I do this to illustrate a point, not to make anyone uncomfortable. But in Psalm 46:10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Be still and I will fight for you."
Yeah, in other words, stay home. Hashtag stay home.
the Egyptians know this better than anybody else. There was a point where Yahweh threw a little tantrum and he told his folks, stay home. And a lot of people died. And those that stayed home didn't.
The Exodus being kind of a whole other topic that, we probably should do at some point, talk about the perspectives on that, historical versus, other. But the point remains that, if you really have faith that things are going to be better, then why agitate about, oh my God, it's going to be so much worse if we don't go back to the way it was. I think maybe this is more about fear of, I don't know what to do other than what I've been doing. I don't know how to adapt.
This is fear. Mm-hmm. False evidence appearing real.
Mm.
The false evidence of, oh, everything's going bad, the economy's in the tank. Let me tell you something. The economy may be bad from a number standpoint, but think about how bad it's going to be if we lose 200,000, 300,000, or 400,000 people. Mm-hmm. I don't care how many businesses are open at full strength, or if we have herd immunity at that point. Mm-hmm. Anytime you don't have 500,000 consumers mm-hmm. in an economy, it's going to hurt. I don't care how big you are.
Yeah. And that's also true because remember, I have viewers across the globe, and folks in other countries are facing similar issues, and the numbers, population and the estimates, for how many people we could lose, it may be different for each country, but the general situation is still the same. That you have a push-pull right now between the folks that want to try and play this safe, and then the other ones that are saying we've got to get back to normal, the way things were before all of this, and it's not just like your Southern Baptists that are clamoring to open the churches again. One of the things that struck me was you had Eastern Orthodox Christians that were all sharing communion from the same chalice, and I'm like, oh my God. It's funny, growing up...
That's funny.
I know. Well, it's funny, growing up as a Catholic, I always wondered about the communion vessel. When I was little, when I got, confirmed, or not confirmed, but, First Communion, was able to participate in that, I always wondered about, okay, they're wiping the chalice, but, everybody's taking a sip from it, and, does that mean... Of course, I also was glad that I was older than my brothers, and so I didn't have to share cooties with them, but, what about all the other people in the church, and, what if somebody's sick? Are we all going to get sick from this? Even as a kid, I was, 10 years old, I was wondering about that, and the answer is yes, everybody could get sick from that,
One of the things I'm going to say that needs to be said, and nobody will. The reason churches are screaming, let us have our parishioners, let us have our parishioners, mm-hmm. let us have services, is because people typically don't come in there with an empty pocket. Mm. If you have services, you get tithes. And whether they be a nonprofit corporation, which all churches are, mm-hmm. they still have payroll, they still have mortgages probably, etc., etc., etc.
The bigger they are, and the more they're...
Right, and if you get one of these super mega doofa churches, I don't care who it is. They owe bills. They do. I don't know of any super mega doofa church mm-hmm. that is lock, stock, and barrel debt free. Mm-hmm. Or that they don't owe something on a line of credit, at mm-hmm. least. Unfortunately, if it were truly faith, somebody would tell you that the early Christians were once told, worship as though you were in a closet. Mm-hmm. Stay home. Mm-hmm. Even after more states start easing restrictions, I implore you, stay home another 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. Do whatever you can. Stay home. This thing is far from over. And those of us that can hold up the longest, and I mean months, mm-hmm. if possible. I don't plan to leave my house other than to go get fast food mm-hmm. until November. Because I have asthma, and somebody's got to take care of her. And I'll be damned if it's not going to be me. I mean, Starstream gets too much attention as it is. Regardless of what faith you are, know that we love you.
Yeah.
Know that we're not doing this to rant. Know that we want every one of you safe. Mm-hmm. We want the world to be safe. Has anybody noticed how much the planet has healed since we took a month off?
Didn't you say that you rolled outside today and it's like the air smelled fresh?
The air smells different. I don't smell motor oil and gas.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that I say, you know, because a lot of us, you know, talk about wouldn't it be great to have a physical church, you know, like a Kemetic church, you know, or this or that, you know, and we all have that dream to be able to go and, you know, have a service in a building that's you know, themed to us. But I can definitely say right now that's not a priority, and I think, you know, being able to do things online, yeah, I like being able to have people together, but, you know, we're just gonna have to wait, and we just have to adapt. And, you know, it's funny, I had more of a problem with the way things were going when it was just the kind of drift that people were taking, and, you know, being more focused on doing this than, you know, the other people in a room with them. But when we're all doing that because we have to, I can live with it a little easier. So, you know, that's something we just have to adapt, and you know, I guess what I would want to tell other people, you know, of other faiths is, you know, if you know, if it's about faith, then you should be able to do it even if you're the only person who believes it. You know, there was a time when I thought I was the only person who was a Kemetic and was not Orthodox. You know, and I was like, you know what, if I have to be a solitary just so that I can worship as an Egyptian polytheist and not be, you know, looking to someone, you know, using names and titles of a pharaoh and saying that they're, you know, the mouthpiece for the gods, you know, I didn't want anything to do with that. And I said, well, if I'm the only one, you know, who feels that way, then fine, I'll just have to do it myself. The funny thing, when I sat down with that conviction in mind, eventually other people started, you know, seeking me out and talking to me, and, you know, now I've got over 3,000 subscribers now on this channel, and we've got, you know, a Facebook group that I've got like over 100 people, closer to 200 people wanting to join, you know, and there are lots of people who, you know, feel that way. So it starts with you. Whatever your faith is, it starts with you, and if you can't, you know, hold that in your heart, whether, you know, you're pagan, Christian, you know, whatever, then you know, you have to ask yourself, what am I? What is this really about for me? That's my thought.
And for those of you who are still wondering what's this really about for you, regardless of what path you're on, don't be afraid to take the path. Mm-hmm. Walk the path. At first, it might be about something slightly social, mm-hmm. but you never know what you might find. Give yourself the chance. Love yourself enough to take the risk. Remember, decency and love come first. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah, I mean, you know, take the risk and, you know, just explore and
right, go for it.
You know, look within and see what you find.
Yeah.
You've told me some really interesting stories about when you were younger, and you were just telling me, you know, you went to a Catholic church once because you were bored and wanted to get out of the house and wanted to go to a service. Did you go to a mass? Or?
I was bored, I wanted to get out of the house, and I figured if there was anything that would slap people into freaking amazement, it was, you're bored and you want to do what? And you want to go where? So did my father, who is a proud, loudmouthed, love you, Dad, rest in peace, Roman Catholic stand up with his son and go, "Sure, boy, let's go." My mother took me to Mass. My mother was not Catholic. When I got home and my father asked, "How was it?" I said, "Eh."
But you said that he thought it was a sacrilege that you went to church just because you were bored.
Yes, my father, asked me, what made you suddenly decide to want to go to church? I was bored. And then suddenly my father calls it black sin. Now, I've never heard of black sin. I never knew sin had a color. But I can say this. I found it really funny that a man, at that time, this was 1988. My father hadn't been to Mass since 1963.
Yeah, when his dad died.
Right.
That's so...
Incidentally, between 1963 and his death, how many times did he go to Mass? Twice. Incidentally, his funeral was not one of them.
Well, funny thing is, I think we weren't able to give Dad an official funeral, but he's been remembered at the Osiris Mysteries multiple times. So go figure.
Yes.
But and you told me that later on you became a regular at a local Baptist church.
I did.
And had a lot of interesting experiences there. But what ultimately made you decide to, taper out going to church? Or, what ended that chapter?
Well, what ended that chapter for me was not the Baptist church I was going to at the time. The Baptist church that I was going to at the time, I went to a Baptist church because
Didn't somebody invite you?
A friend of mine could take me there. And B, I found out that an old friend who used to be an NFL football player, his brother was the pastor there, and lo and behold, the brother who was the pastor reunited my friend and I.
Oh, he reconnected you with Mike Barber.
He reconnected me with Mike Barber after 15, 16 years. And let me tell you, that was nice. It was brief, but it was nice. He is now a minister. If you ever want to look up Mike Barber Ministries, go ahead.
Of course, I'm sure he would be scratching his head to see you on a Kemetic channel.
Well, and here's what I have to say to that. People can doubt my faith. They can judge my faith all they want. They're not allowed. I know who I kneel to. I know what I believe. And if I'm the only one that believes it, that's fine. And in the end, if I'm wrong, that's also fine. I'll deal with it. And I'll accept it.
Or you can just come hang out with us. But, you were telling me that you don't like going to church now because you don't like the message. You're tired of people not talking about the good news.
You can go to church these days, and there's an agenda. There is a political agenda. There is a business agenda. There is seldom a true agenda of faith. How do you live this faith? How do you walk in it, roll in it, however you want to make your way through this life on that path? It's seldom about that. We get scripture readings, we get sermons, we get all this stuff. When's the last time the pastor came in, sat down in his blue jeans and said, you know what, guys? I had this issue today, and as I read my Bible, I realized I needed answers from people. Because sometimes the work of God and the message of God comes through human hand and human interaction. That is my personal belief. I don't expect people to necessarily agree with it. But if we do agree with it, stay home. There are people working miracles every day.
Yeah. And they wear surgical gowns and masks.
And deliver pizzas.
Yeah. You know, one of these days we're going to have to let you tell the story about Jesus Christ Pizza Guy.
Professional delivery. I don't want to turn anyone off to Christianity. Christ is beautiful. I question what's being done in His name many, many days. I am not perfect in that sense. I do believe I am a perfect human being. I screw up regularly.
Yes.
But in terms of a perfect Christian, no. I'm just a guy that's trying to get over the bumps every day.
Well, you know, it's funny. Even there's a wisdom text. I believe it's the instructions of Amenemhotep, where he says that you know, only the gods are perfect. You know, and human beings, you know, make mistakes, but you know, fall short of perfection. So even in ancient Egyptian times, there were, you know, perceptive individuals who said, you know what, you know, we're not on that level.
But we're not preaching the good news in church anymore. We're preaching the news of the week.
Or why people are going to hell.
And you know, the 10,000 ways you're going to go to hell, and there's only one way to heaven. And I will debate you on that based on Scripture.
Yeah, or it goes back to what our friend Tina said about, you know, the sin of despair.
Yeah.
You know.
The moment you say there's only one path in, you assume the role of God Himself. Or herself, however you see them.
Yeah.
And I don't have the nuts in my watch pocket to do that, y'all. I really don't. Who's to know who's going and who's to know who's not?
And, you know, in all fairness, I do have to say that it's very easy, especially for us as Kemetics, because we do believe in a personal judgment, you know, when people die, you know, and they're judged before Osiris, you know, and it's very easy to fall into that same trap of saying, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to enjoy eating Uranus, you know. It's very tempting to say that. We can all think of people that you know, we can imagine, you know, would fail the scales and get gobbled up by a monster or something, but that's, you know, the same thing applies. You're assuming that you know what the verdict is going to be, and you know that's a, you know, Anubis and Osiris's job, not ours.
And the one thing I would caution everybody is this: no matter where we are in life at a given moment, the moment we commit those words of damnation, the moment we commit those words of they're lost, there's no hope for them. You take away the chance for grace they have in their next breath. You take away their moment of clarity. You take away their weight of responsibility. You take away any chance for sorrow, pain, or redemption, or grace, regardless of what system you're in.
Yeah.
P.S. When you give up on somebody else, you might just be giving up on yourself too. Don't do that. So, whatever you do, don't talk it, don't shout it, live it.
Mm.
How you live will say volumes.
Yeah.
Because how you react says volumes too.
Mm-hmm. And that goes for all of us.
Thanks for letting me run my mouth, guys. I love you. I hope it helps. If you have any more questions, ask them.
Mm.
If you don't ever want to hear from me again, say so.
I doubt that.
Thanks, guys.
Well, I guess that's it for this issue of our episode of Kemetic Crossroads. Hopefully we've shared some perspective and given you some food for thought. And if you enjoyed this, then tell us more about what things you'd like for us to talk about. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that whole Exodus thing, and go from there, or any other topics you might have relating to interfaith. So, in the meantime, stay safe and well. Like we were saying, stay home. And, as I would tell people, Senebti, which is Egyptian for, be well, and Anka Jai, live long and prosper.
May the force be with you.
That too.